Welcome. That is a strange feeling as they all leave you. It's good to be here this morning. Really good to be here this morning. I don't know about you, but this week was an interesting week for Ken and I. One I don't want to have again, in the sense that I had my week planned out because I was going to preach. I was really excited. And I had everything planned out, and I actually exercised. And yes, you do enjoy exercising once you get past it. Oh, do I have to exercise? Yes, you do enjoy exercising. And so I was exercising, and I came back home and talking to my husband, and we had this lovely dog who decided to take off running, only forgot to tell my husband. And consequently, he ended up falling, and I did not beat him up. Honest, I did not. And so we had to deal with that, and of course, we didn't go get it checked out. So the next day, that night I was working on my sermon and realized all my books are back home. I don't have them here. And I actually have the phone number of one person in this church, maybe two, if I would have looked at the bulletin. And graciously, Ken, not me, called. I have this thing about making phone calls. It's one of my major defects. He called. I said, sure, come on over. So we drove over to pick up the book that I needed and talked and talked and talked. And it was just lovely. And we went home, but after that talk and talking to some people the next morning, I said, Ken, you're going to the emergency room. Well, actually, the urgent care. And they decided, you're not staying here, you're going to the emergency room. And so that hospital that we got to go to last year when we were here, we went to that hospital, and they had all of Ken's records, and I just said, be prepared, it's gonna be a long day. And we walked into the emergency room. There was one person in the emergency room, one. We walked right in, they looked at him, they did everything that needed to be done. They said, nope, you're good, you're gonna go home. And then the strangest thing happened, his heart rate dropped down to 39. And it did it 4 different times, and they kept saying it was the machine. And the more his heart rate was dropping, the more mine was increasing. And the head nurse said, she came in and she said, he's okay, he has AFib, you know that, he's fine, but I'm going to do an EKG just to demonstrate it. Well, he's fine. And I was so grateful. And I said to myself, you know, this is all happening because you're preaching on Sabbath. And we got home, and we both were exhausted. How can just doing that exhaust you? But we were both exhausted. And I am just so grateful that we are both here. Because you see very quickly how things can change. In a blink of an eye, boom, and we would have had a different story. And I wanted to share with you this morning just this sermon. I love this sermon because it demonstrates to me, and I hope to you, that it does not matter in the sense of how many times we fail, God is with us. I have this terrible habit when I get nervous God's this way, so I go this way. And he's going, would you get back here? And I'm going, okay, God, I know I need to trust you. And so as I was putting this together, I tried to do a PowerPoint presentation on a computer that sometimes works and sometimes not. And I want to tell you guys something. You may not know this sitting in the pew, but you have two people up in that booth that know what they're doing. And because of them, I saw an answer to prayer. Oh, just do this, do this, and just like that, he did everything. All that stupid worry and anxiousness. That's why God says, don't be anxious for anything. I've got it. And so this morning, the title of the sermon is The Look. I don't know what you think of when you see the look. But have you ever heard the statement, if looks could kill, I'd be dead? Oh, you have heard it. Obviously, that's not a friendly look, is it? Or did you ever have someone you knew give you the look? Like your spouse, maybe your kids. Oh, you're embarrassing me. Maybe a friend. You know, when I was a lot younger, my mom would be in a choir loft. We had a big church. And I'd be sitting back. How I was allowed to sit with friends, I have no idea. But I was sitting with friends. And you know how you're talking when you're not supposed to be? No, that doesn't happen here, but they talk. And you're talking, and as a kid, I just kind of got this sick feeling. And sure enough, I would look. My mom didn't have to say a word, although she probably would have. Didn't have to say it, she just looked. And I knew what? I needed to close my lips, sit up, and start listening. Now, later, she did tell me, she said, you know, Pat, there were people sitting behind you. They were visitors. They never heard about the love of God, and you talking just distracted them. You got to remember that. And I have, because I became a teacher. And when I became a teacher, I had a look. Now, none of my students here, so you don't get the real look, but I had a look. And this look, we could have groups here, and I could be working with somebody, and I could hear something, and I just looked. Bam! Stopped it. Just stopped it. They chuckle at me because even now they say, you're not giving me a look, are you? Okay, nope, I'm not. So for me, when I was reading in the Gospel of Luke, okay, this is the experiment, and it worked. And it said, now, remember, Jesus is already have been taken to one set of priests and Caiaphas and all of that, and he's been moved on, and he's in the court. And Jesus is already being slapped and everything that could happen to him. And in Luke 22:1, it said, and the Lord turned and looked at Peter. And I went, and the Lord, what? And I looked in the other Gospels. This is the only place this is recorded. And that intrigued me. And I wondered, what kind of look did Jesus give him? I mean, Was it the kind that we're used to receiving? Hey, get your act together. But whatever that look was, the result for Peter was amazing, yet painful. As it continues to say, then Peter remembered. I'm sorry. The words of the Lord, how he had said to him, before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. So Peter went out and wept. Pray with me. Father, your love is amazing. Your patience is awesome. May we see in Peter's life the transformation that you will make in us if we will only trust you. In Jesus' name, amen. So how did Peter get to this point that he, of all people, denied Jesus? Let's take a look at Peter with his time with Jesus. Now, we're not going to hit every event because we would be here all day plus, but just a few. And Jesus, walking by the Sea of Galilee, saw 2 brothers, Simon called Peter and Andrew his brother, casting a net into the sea, for they were fishermen. Then he said to them, follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. They immediately left their nets and followed him. That's pretty amazing, isn't it? Now, we know that Peter had interactions with Jesus. This was not his first interaction. All right. But it was a beginning for Peter. Now, in Luke 4, 38 and 39, we see another time Jesus has been in the synagogue, and he leaves, and he goes to Peter's house. And Peter's Peter's wife's mother was sick with a high fever. So that's his mother-in-law, all right? And they made request of him concerning her. So he stood over her and rebuked the fever, and it left her. And immediately she arose and served them. Now, if that would have been me, I'm thinking, I still don't feel good. I think you can wait on me a little bit, can't you? Please. No. She got up and served them immediately. And Peter saw all of this. Another example is in Luke 5. And Jesus saw 2 boats standing by the lake, but the fishermen had gone from them and were washing their nets. What are the fishermen doing? They're washing the nets. So they've already taken the nets out, and they're washing them. Now, if you're a fisherman, from my perspective as a wife, you know how much trouble it is to get this stuff out of there and get it over here to take care of it. All right? So that's what they had done. And Jesus comes and says, hey, can I use your boat? This is paraphrase. Can I use your boat? And Peter says, absolutely, yes. And so when he gets done talking to the multitudes, Jesus says, launch out into the deep and let down your nets for a catch. But Simon answered, Master, we have toiled all night and caught nothing. Think about that. But because of you, we'll let down our nets. Now, Peter knows it's not the right time of day to fish. And he's thinking, not going to catch any fish. I guess I have to show him when you're supposed to fish. I mean, Ken and I used to fish, and he'd want to get up and be out there at 5:30 in the morning. I said, hey, the fish don't start talking until 10 o'clock. You can't catch fish before 10. And it used to irritate him because we'd go out early and catch nothing, and 10 o'clock, started catching fish. Yeah, that was frustrating. But Peter knew how to fish. Jesus was a carpenter. He was not a fisherman. What does he know? But Peter's going, it's okay. We'll do it, Lord. So he did it. And guess what? And when they had done this, they had caught a great number of fish, and their nets were breaking. So they signaled their partners who had been cleaning their nets, got them together, and in the other boat to come and help them, and they came and filled both the boats so that they began to sink. Now, who do you think knew how to fish? And when Simon Peter saw it, he fell down at Jesus' knees saying, depart from me, for I am a sinful man. And what did Jesus say? And Jesus said, don't be afraid. From now on, you will catch men. I kind of wonder if the indication isn't, you know how many fish you just caught and the boat was sinking? If you'll trust me, you do the same with men. Okay. Peter at that moment became part of the inner circle. And as time went on and Jesus ministered, one day Jesus asked his disciples, who do you say that I am? So Peter said, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. Now, who told Peter that? Mm-hmm. And Jesus is, yes. Yes. And another time, when others left Jesus feeling that his sayings were too difficult to bear, Jesus asked, I'm sorry. Jesus asked. But Simon answered him, Lord, to whom shall we go? Because Jesus said, are you going to leave me also? And Peter said, Lord, where are we going to go? He said, you have the words of eternal life. Also, we have come to believe that you are the living Christ, the Son of the living God. Yeah, listen to Peter. He's amazing. I mean, he's the kind of guy you want to be around. Oh, yeah, he's a little headstrong and does his thing, but he loves Jesus, right? Well, we continue on because it appears that Peter knows who Jesus is. Yet, listen to what Peter does. Jesus starts trying to tell the disciples that he has to go to Jerusalem, that he has to suffer many things from the elders and the chief priests and scribes, and to be killed and to be raised on the third day. Now, let me ask you a question. What did I just say Jesus was going to have to do? Where's he going? Is he going to have a party? You guys get it. Peter, what did he do? Then Peter took Jesus aside and began to rebuke him, saying, far be it from you, Lord, this shall not happen to you. What does Jesus do? Get behind me, Satan. You are an offense to me, for you are not mindful of the things of God, but the things of men. Okay, if you're Peter, what did that just feel like? You know, Peter, who was always doing what he thought was the right thing, but for the wrong reasons. Have you ever been in that kind of a position? Someone puts you in your place? Oh, it's right. We're real good at that as Adventist Christians. We're right. But for some reason, we tend to alienate the people we're talking to because we are so right. Because we forgot what our message really is. Even so, Peter got to be involved with the transfiguration. And here we have, who was there? Peter, James, and John. And because Peter didn't know what to do when he woke up and he saw this, the first thing that jumps out of his mouth is, let us make 3 tabernacles. Yeah, let's do a building project. Really? And it's almost like in verse 7, God speaks and Peter hears him. And God says, this is my beloved Son. Hear him. Now, Jesus was always in danger. We all know that. And his disciples knew this and decided to protect Jesus with swords. In Luke 22:38, it says, Lord, look, we have 2 swords. Okay, I don't understand why there's 2 swords, but there's 2 swords. And from Peter's perspective, he's prepared to take on anybody. He will protect Jesus. And this nonsense of Jesus telling them that he was going to die was not going to happen. Not if he had anything to say about it. Why? His perspective was wrong. Finally, the Passover night comes. Jesus shares again that they must watch and pray, lest you enter into temptation. And he says to Peter, Simon, Simon, indeed, Satan has asked for you that he may sift you as wheat. But I have prayed for you that your faith should not fail. And when you return to me, strengthen your brethren. What does Peter say? Lord, I am ready to go with you both to prison and to death. That's Peter. Peter also replied, even if I have to die with you, I will not deny you. And so did all the other disciples. Self-sufficient Peter, he still knows what's best in spite of what Jesus says. Again, in Matthew 20, verses 18 and 19, Jesus tries to tell the disciples that he will be betrayed and condemned to death, and he will be mocked and scourged and crucified, and he will rise on the 3rd day. They just couldn't hear it. They didn't understand what he was saying. At first I thought the reason why they couldn't understand what he was saying is because they just loved him too much. I didn't get this until my mother was dying, and the nurse came and said, I just want you to know your mother's dying. And I'm like, no way. My mother's 95. She's up and about. She's good. There's no problem. You just need to come in the afternoon. She is not a morning person. Yes, my mother died. Not right then, but she did. But I thought, well, maybe that's why the disciples just couldn't hear what Jesus was saying. The reality is, they were arguing about who would be the greatest and get to sit next to Jesus when he established his kingdom. Jesus is telling them what is going to happen to him so they can be prepared. And they're worried about who's going to be the greatest. As they are together for the Passover meal, what happens? You remember? Jesus gets up to wash their feet. Why? Nobody else would do it. They were all too great. They wouldn't tell you that. And so what does Peter do? Lord, are you washing my feet? And Jesus said, what I'm doing you do not understand now, but you will know after this. Peter says, you will never wash my feet. Jesus said, if I do not wash you, you have no part in me. And Peter said, well, then Lord, not my feet only, but wash me all over. And Jesus said, you don't need a bath. You just need me, let me wash your feet. Peter finally allows Jesus to wash his feet. Now, they're in the garden. Peter and the others are told to watch and pray. They didn't. They slept. The soldiers came. Peter is going to protect Jesus. Remember the sword. He uses it. He's a really bad aim, and he cuts off the high priest's servant's ear. And Jesus, what's he do? He heals all of this stuff is going on around you, and what does he do? He picks up the ear and he heals it. And he looks at Peter and says, put your sword in the sheath. Shall I not drink the cup which my Father has given me? Now, I don't know what you're like when there's turmoil going on. This is not a question he's just like, Peter, listen. Now, Peter was hurt. He didn't understand. Each event where Jesus rebuked Peter thought he was on the right track, and the rebukes stung. He didn't understand. He thought he understood what he was supposed to be doing in relationship with Jesus. He thought his way was the way. His idea was correct. His self-sufficiency was right. Thus, when temptation came, he was still nursing the hurt. And 3 times he was embarrassed to be associated with Jesus. The last time with cursing. And the rooster crowed. And Jesus looked at Peter. Not like our look of reproof with a condemning look, or a look that said, are you serious, Peter? You blew it again? But of a look of compassion, deep pity, and sorrow with no hint of anger. That's the kind of God that loves us. In Desire of Ages, it says the disciples were terrified as they saw Jesus permit himself to be taken and bound. They were offended that he should suffer this humiliation to himself and them. They could not understand his conduct. They blamed him for submitting to the mob. In their indignation and fear, Peter proposed that they save themselves. Following this suggestion, they all forsook him and fled. Who did that? Peter. At last, Peter, he didn't know what to do. So he followed Jesus. And when this happened, he couldn't handle it anymore. He had to leave. And when he left, while the degrading oaths were still fresh on Peter's lip, and the shrill crowing of the rooster was still ringing in his ear, the Savior turned from the frowning judge, and he looked at his poor disciple. Unable to endure the scene any longer, he rushed heartbroken from the hall. At last, he found himself in Gethsemane, on the very spot where Jesus had poured out his soul to his Father. Peter fell upon his face and wished that he could die. So Peter went out and wept bitterly. Peter was heartbroken, and he was broken. Yet God had not forsaken him. When he returned to the others, humiliated, broken, disappointed in himself, Jesus, when he was risen, made sure that Peter was mentioned specifically. Tell Peter. In other words, don't let Peter wallow in his failures. Go tell him. I want him to be there. And we see them coming together. And what does Jesus do? He called Peter out in front of the other disciples. Now, we normally don't do that, but in this case, it needed to happen because he did this in front of all the disciples. They'd lost confidence even in Peter. And Jesus said, "Do you love me?" "Yes, Lord, you know I do." "Well, then feed my lambs." "Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me?" "Yes, Lord, you know I love you." "Well, tend my sheep." "Simon, son of Jonah, do you love me?" When somebody asks you something and they ask you multiple times, do you have a sense of frustration? Okay, I get it. And Peter says, "Lord," and this is key, "you know all things. You know I love you." Jesus knew he was going to deny him, but Peter didn't believe him. And now it comes to the place where Peter is finally saying, "Lord, you know I love you." And Jesus said, "Absolutely, feed my sheep." Finally, Peter's focus wasn't on his ability, his self-confidence, but on Jesus. Peter went on to minister those young in the faith, to open the scriptures to the ignorant, and to educate the people. Now, this would require care and tenderness and patience and perseverance and long-suffering, characteristics that Peter was not known for. So what does that have to do with us? That experience was Peter's, it's not mine. Yet what was Peter's issue? He had a wrong perspective of Jesus' mission. He thought Jesus would be king now, and that he would rule over the Romans and get rid of them. that he would establish his kingdom now. He never comprehended Jesus' real mission. Every day, Jesus patiently led Peter, and Peter watched, and he listened, and he did wonderful things with Jesus. But Peter felt his way was a better way, to correct Jesus, to get him to understand his mission according to Peter. Peter never surrendered to Jesus' way, to walk the walk that Jesus wanted him to walk. Peter wanted to do it his way until Peter was broken. I sometimes wonder about us. God is calling us to minister. He's calling us to love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and great commandment. And the second is, you shall love your neighbors as yourself. Sometimes we love our neighbors before we love God because we're doing and we're doing and we're doing and we're doing and we're doing. Our first mission is to love God. How do we love God? I love Jesus. You know, how do you know? I mean, and I don't mean how do you know if you love Jesus. But I met my husband a long time ago. And something happened, and I can't explain it. I can't tell you how it happened. But we fell in love. And as much as I hated talking on the telephone, because we lived far apart, he would call me and I would talk on the phone. And we just spent time together. He didn't force me to spend time with him. I didn't force him to spend time with me. Matter of fact, I haven't even forced him to stay married to me. But he loves me. Even with a black eye that I did not give him. But he loves me. And I want to spend time with him. I love spending time with him. And that's what happens when we love Jesus. We spend time in his word, not studying so we can refute the issues. That's a different study time. I'm talking about when you love Jesus, you spend time with him. You spend time reading about him. And there might not be fireworks and like, oh, wow, this is wonderful. You may feel no difference. But God is doing a mighty work in our hearts when we spend time with him. I'll tell you a little secret about me. I worked a lot. I was what you call a workaholic. I would get home from board meetings at 12, 1 o'clock in the morning, and I would be at work by 7:30 in the morning. And I would get bits and snatches of having my time with God. And God was so gracious to me. And since I retired, you know, I don't get it because I am not busy like I was busy, but I have no time. I don't know what it is. And I started saying, God, I really just want to spend time with you. And I don't know how to do it because I'm with Ken all the time. I don't know how to do it. And I said, so if you'll wake me up really early in the morning without waking Ken up, I'll spend time with you then. You need to be careful what you pray. But God does. He wakes me up early in the morning so I can have time just with him. I hate journaling. I think it's the stupidest thing you could ever do. Right? Isn't that? I know some of you feel the same way. Guess what I started doing? Writing down all this time that I had with God. And I am amazed. I'm not really that different because I'm doing it, but I love that time because I feel safe. I feel secure. I feel like this is God, and he loves me. That's what we're called to, loving God. Not to let anything get in the way of loving God. To love like Jesus did towards his disciples and to the people with patience, long-suffering, compassion, mercy, and forgiveness. That's God's Spirit was able to pour out. That's why it could happen, even when they disagreed. And that's the beauty of the church. We might not agree, but we love one another. And in that love and forgiveness of one another, others will see God. And they will be drawn to him. We have a message to give that God is love. He's coming back to redeem his people and to end this great controversy. And he is the winner, by the way, in case you didn't know. Like Peter, who had to learn that it's about Jesus and how to minister to others. So we need to learn it's about Jesus and our personal relationship with him. We do need to spend time with him. We do need to let him change our attitude of that he is a tyrant and that he wants nothing good and that he's vindictive. Those are lies. Those are Satan's lies. We need to develop that intimate relationship with him. It needs to be our goal every day as we surrender all to him and to listen to his leading and move forward in sharing the gospel of Jesus to all who will listen. There are those who will not. Oops. Sorry. God used Peter in a mighty way. You see his life afterwards, the way he died. He was fearless. Did he make mistakes? Oh, yeah. He was Peter. But he knew the importance of coming back to Jesus every time. God will use us too when we truly surrender to him. And he is waiting to do a mighty work through each one of us. And I am so grateful that there is a God in heaven who loves us that mightily, who forgives us that recklessly. And for some people, it's an irritation, but he continues to forgive us, even when we do it again. When we come to him and surrender it to him and say, God, thank you for your forgiveness. Sing with me the song, I Surrender All, because as we do that, the blessings of God will be mighty.